All right. Well, we are going to be in Nehemiah chapter 6 today. And Nehemiah is a interesting book, and one thing that I've always tried to do is try to bring what we read in Scripture that happened literally thousands of years ago, but then apply to present day. Man, I'm finding Nehemiah really does apply. However, it's really kind of dark and frustrating, and can be a little heavy. You know, and so there's times I'm like, man, I just kind of want to skip to the end of Nehemiah. But we're not going to. We're going to keep plowing through. I do think it is vitally important that we understand the battle that we're in. And we also are always reminded, we know who the winner is. We know who the ultimate victor is. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you're in the battle. And if we act like, here's the dangerous thing, if we act like we're not in the battle, then we are not going to try to help bring people who are deceived to a saving knowledge of Christ, because we think, everything's just going to be fine. It's not that big of a deal. No, it is a big deal. Right? There are ideologies out there that are trying to deceive people and keep them from coming to a life-changing and saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And they are very effective at doing it. And they have infiltrated our churches, they have infiltrated our institutions, they have infiltrated this country in ways that we have not seen in the past. And if we are not at least aware of that, then we're not able to engage people in conversation, because people are talking about all of these aspects of the modern spiritual battle, whether they know it or not. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that kind of starts out, and they're not coming at it from a spiritual perspective. They're just coming at it from, man, things seem really crazy right now, right? Nothing makes sense, right? How many conversations have started off that way? People are feeling this. And if we can help to in creative ways, maybe in subtle ways, because I know it's a heavy lift just to come at somebody and say, hey, the spiritual battle is raging. It's good versus evil. You better pick the right side. That may not be your lead in talking with someone, right? But we should be able to acknowledge, say, yeah, things are really crazy right now. You know, and we actually can see through Scripture that this is the way things have worked for a long time, of trying to deceive people and bring them away from God. And that now that we're in a culture that is much less Christian, right, that has moved away from the fundamental foundational principles of God, that's why all of this craziness is happening, right? And I think we need to be proactive in that, and I think we can learn a lot from Nehemiah. So what we've been seeing is Nehemiah has had attack after attack after attack, right? So 2 weeks ago we talked about how he realized, okay, we're going to have to sword up, we're putting up guards, but we're plowing on. We're going to get this job done, and so that starts to repel and slow down the attack. But then there were attacks even from within, right? There's problems within that Nehemiah was going to have to deal with. Then we get to Nehemiah chapter 6, and we see the last-ditch effort to stop the project. And our good old friends Sanballat and Tobias come back. And they're the outsiders, remember? I believe Sanballat, he's from Samaria. And Tobiah is from kind of some of the Arab or the other countries around there. They do have positions of leadership, just not directly over Jerusalem. But they do not want, they're the ones that said, we do not want to see anything good come to these people. Right? So they've been fighting, trying to disrupt for a while. So here's kind of their last-ditch effort. Nehemiah chapter 6, we'll read the first 9 verses first. It says, now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall and that there was no breach left in it, although to that time I had not set up the doors and the gates, Sanballat the Geshem sent to me, saying, come and let us meet together at Hakkaphrim in the plain of Ono. But they intended to do me harm. And I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? And they sent to me 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. In the same way, Sanballat, for the 5th time, sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand. In it was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem also says it, that you and the Jews intend to rebel. That is why you are building the wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king. And you have also set up prophets to proclaim concerning you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah, and now the king will hear of these reports. So now come, and let us take counsel together. Then I sent to him, saying, no such things as you say have been done, for you are inventing them out of your own mind. For they all wanted to frighten us, thinking, their hands will drop from the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. All right, so the tactics are changing a little bit here. And there's 2 specific things that's happening. So you have these governors that they're kind of coming as diplomats, right? Hey, we just want to work things out. Hey, we're all in this together. We just want what's best for everybody. We need to have a meeting of the minds, right? We need to have the leaders of the world come together because we can solve these problems. And so they invite Nehemiah, say, hey, come on out to us. Now, we don't really know that specific place of the word that I can't pronounce, but the plain of Ono is kind of north of Jerusalem, about 20, 30 miles. And it was kind of on the border going into Samaria of that day. And so what were they trying to do? They were trying to lure Nehemiah out of his wall, out of his place of security. They were trying to get him out in the open, and they had bad intentions. Right? That Nehemiah knew this. Even if they weren't going to kill him, which we actually see that they would definitely have wanted to do that. That's why Nehemiah had to arm all of the workers, right? But they did not intend for this to go well. Their intention was to stop the work, right? The walls are nearly finished. In fact, the bulk of the walls are finished, but the gates are not, right? So that there's still time to get this work to stop. So they figured if we can get Nehemiah out of the picture, he's the one that rallied everyone together. He's the one that's keeping them looking in the right direction. He's the one holding all of this together. If we can get him and we get him out, right, then we have a chance to stop this thing. And of course, Nehemiah recognizes that, and he keeps saying, why would I stop what God has sent me to do? Right, to come and have a stupid meeting with you guys when I know that y'all are not here in good faith. He knew that, right? There are people that are not going to engage with you in good faith. They just want to get you away, and they want you to start pulling you closer to their perspective and to their ideology. And Nehemiah recognizes that. And so then the next step happens. And what is the next step? So the 5th time that Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, the Arabs, send their messenger, they send with an open letter. It's interesting that Nehemiah mentions that this open letter. What does that mean? It means that this letter has been read. This letter has already started circulating. This is already out among the people, right? And so what are they saying? We know that you have a rebellion plan. We know that you are going to become king. You're setting up this system right? And they're getting that message to all the surrounding people with the purpose of doing what? Causing dissension. With the purpose of eventually that message getting to who? The Persian king, right? So these are just straight up lies that are intended to put Nehemiah on the defensive. That Nehemiah is now going to have to defend himself, even though he has done none of these things. That is such a perfect tactic, right? To accuse someone out of thin air. In fact, as Nehemiah said, you pulled these out of your mind. Maybe that's the PG version. There was another phrase that popped into my head. I did not. We won't go there too much. But pulled these accusations out of thin air, right? And then you accuse the person. And Nehemiah, if he doesn't defend himself, people go, well, maybe he did that. Maybe there is truth. And then if he does try to defend himself, there's nothing he can defend himself against, right? Because they're false allegations. How do you prove a negative? It's like when someone says, you're a racist. How do you prove that you're not a racist? You can't. Right? No matter what you say, you're in this box, right? Because they're not coming at you with actual facts. They're not coming at you saying, no, I saw you post this or use this language or do this. You have nothing to defend against. That's the situation Nehemiah finds himself in. It's an insidious but yet effective tactic of evil, of ideologies that go against the things of God, the good, the true, and the beautiful. They will try to separate you from your faith. They will move you out from your foundational beliefs, and they will start slowly twisting, slowly trying to get you to concede just a little bit, right? And then if that doesn't work, then the attacks start coming, right? And the unfounded attacks, and you always feel like you're on the defensive. That's how these ideologies work. That's how evil works. And so we see Nehemiah having to deal with those. And I love what he says. He says, they all wanted to frighten us, to cause fear, right? For their thinking was that their hands will drop from the work and it will not be done. And then I love Nehemiah throughout all of this. Nehemiah, he has his little Twitter prayers, right? They're little Twitter posts, because he gets to these places and you can tell he wants you to know that at this moment I stepped back and I thought and I said, oh God, strengthen my hands, right? Because he recognizes I'm not going to be able to defeat this on my own. God, you're going to have to do this. God, give me the strength to continue to endure, right? And man, personal attacks can be so challenging and demoralizing. Right? That is so effective. And a lot of times it's just easier to kind of step back and blend in with the rest of society rather than be out there taking attacks from people that you love, from friends, from co-workers, whoever it may be. Right? And Nehemiah is saying, no, strengthen my hands so that we may continue the work that God has called us to do. And then he goes on. So starting in verse 10. Now when I went to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, son of Metabal, who was confined to his home, he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. They are coming to kill you by night. But I said, should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in. And I understood and saw that God had not sent him, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin. And so they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, O my God, according to all these things they did, and also the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Moreover, in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him, because he was the son-in-law of Shekinah, and son of Era, and son of Johanan, and taken from the daughter of Mesulahim. Oh my goodness. Please be finished. The son of Berechiah and his wife. There we go. Also they spoke of his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him. And Tobiah sent letters to make me afraid. Okay, so let's unpack what's happening here, because it's really important to understand the context of really what is going on here. Now, ultimately, what we see is the result, that the wall is finished. And we see that it was finished in such a way that people recognized, wow, this was more than a human effort, right? There's something more going on here. And this last attack on Nehemiah is very important for us to understand. So Nehemiah went to someone that was within the priestly class. We don't know exactly what his role was. He kind of was a shut-in, it sounds like. But he comes to Nehemiah kind of as a friend, saying, hey, your life is in jeopardy. Which, would that be out of the realm of possibility? No, of course not. Right? And he says, why don't you come into the temple and we will close the doors? Right? Now to us, that sounds, well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You go and, give you a little bit of security. However, Nehemiah, there were very strict rules of who could go into the temple and the procedures that needed to be gone through before you could enter into the temple. Right? You had to be clean. You had to go through all kinds of rules and regulations. Now, we may say, oh, all that stuff doesn't matter. It did back then, okay? It was very serious, and you took it very serious. That was one of the ways you were demonstrating your reverence and your belief and trust in God, is that you took those things serious. So here's this guy saying, hey, your life is in danger. Why don't you just go run into the temple and to be safe? So what was he doing? He was trying to get Nehemiah to break the religious rituals that were normally needed to go in to save himself in the temple. What would that then do? That would cause a rift between Nehemiah and the faithful Jews, because they would say, why are you going in? Who gives you the right to go into the temple and lock yourself in for protection? Right? Now, Nehemiah could have tried to say, well, there's precedent. David went into the temple to protect himself when his enemy was there. That could be done. But Nehemiah, he's been out on the wall with guards all this time. Why now would he just do that? Do you see how they were trying to set him up to cause more division? And then Nehemiah writes later on that Tobiah, many of the Jews had oaths with Tobiah. And so they had been writing letters to him this whole time. Right? So there were people on the inside that were working against Nehemiah. He's realizing that, and he knows what they're asking him to do by going into the temple. It doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but that would have lost Nehemiah's support of the actual religious Jews in that area. And it would have hindered all that he was trying to do, because he wasn't trying just to rebuild a wall. He was trying to start a revival. He was trying to get people to come back to God. So if he was going to break those basic religious tenets, that was going to easily be able to be used against him to say, hey, who is this guy? Right? Look, he doesn't even practice what he preaches. Right? So the enemies of God, the ideologies that are against God, they are going to use the current institutions that were created by God. They will even use those to try to cause dissent, deception, and destruction. That is what they want to do. It's the same story throughout all of history. Right? The enemies of God, the ideologies that are against God, are all about deception and destruction. And we need to be aware of that because it is happening at a rapid pace in our current culture. And I love how Nehemiah, he remains strong. He keeps his hands strong, right? And he finishes the job. And whenever he finishes, he recognizes, and others around recognize, man, you didn't do this on your own strength. And that's exactly right. We cannot defeat the evil ideologies on our own strength. We have to rely on Christ. We have to rely on him. But if we don't recognize how the battle is being fought, then we are going to lose here in an earthly way, right? Not ultimately. See, Nehemiah, he knew there were people plotting against him. He knew, and he found out that, hey, there's some connections with these outsiders and with insiders, right? He understood the battle that was laid out before him. It's vital that we understand the battle that's laid out before us. And so let's take these general principles, these types of attacks, and let's apply them to today. Do we see similarities to how things are working today? And I've struggled with this a little bit, and because I don't want to keep harping on some of these things. But there's days that I'm thinking, I think we maybe we're starting to turn a corner, and maybe things are getting a little bit better. And then I wake up the next day, and I'm like, nope, we're not. A couple weeks ago, preached specifically on two different ideologies that I believe are actively against the things of God. That would be the Marxist kind of viewpoint that has infiltrated so many of oppressor versus oppressed, kind of that leads to communism. All of those things are basically, I put in one big bucket, right? And then on the other side is the radical Islam that will do anything to conquer, and that's its desire. And it has always, from the beginning, it has gone about conquering anything that wasn't fully in line, lockstep with them, and that has included Christians. We just had in the largest city, or I guess it's still the largest city, New York City, they had a primary for their mayor. Now, listen, New York City's crazy, okay? However, they're Americans, and about 25 years ago, they had planes fly into towers, and they were very resilient and strong and rebuilt. 25 years later, the Democrat nominee for mayor, which nearly always wins, well, we don't know in November, the Democrat is a Shia Muslim Marxist. He is from the Democrat Socialist Party. It is this is not right-wing conspiracy stuff. Just read what the guy said. And he was voted to represent the Democrat. I mean, we're talking about a full Marxist and a full Islamist, all mixed up together in this weird, evil bundle. And he's this kind of charismatic guy. He's this young guy. There's a really good chance he's going to be mayor of New York City. And if you don't think that matters, okay. But that is a horrible sign for our culture. I know we're not New York City. But if that ideology can grab hold, it will only keep spreading. Right? And so let's talk a little bit about this. So what did the enemies of Nehemiah do? They lulled him out. Right? They wanted to get him away from his foundational principles, if you will. Away from what he was called to do. Get out. And it was kind of this idea of let's do this in solidarity. Let's bring each other together. Right? And Nehemiah recognized, ooh, this is dangerous. Again, this is not straight line comparisons. But what I've seen since I started seminary to today, this is how I've seen the enemy working. Right? It's kind of set it up that way. Well, I can remember in seminary, and this would have been in college too, late 90s, we started talking a lot about political correctness. Y'all remember that phrase? We need to be politically correct. And it was kind of getting weird. You're like, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was like, wait, we can't say that anymore. We can't do that. Like, what do we mean by political correctness? I remember sitting down in a seminary class with a very intelligent professor, and we were talking about political correctness, and I remember kind of saying, this feels a little dangerous, like we're getting scared to say just what is true, just because it may offend someone. And he was like, well, whenever I hear political correctness, I really think that's what being a Christian is all about. Shouldn't we be respectful of people? Shouldn't we try to not offend other people? Because Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Shouldn't we just go, be kind and be respectful of all persons? And I'm like, yeah, right? Like, yeah, we are, but that doesn't mean that you have to change what is true. And at that time, it was just beginning. And then all of a sudden, I can remember that it wasn't right to call someone who was, I still don't understand it all, but who is, and this one nearly crossed the line and it kind of lost favor. But we couldn't call people Latinos or Hispanic or Mexican, because apparently that was getting a little offensive to some people. So they created this term, and it was used in colleges, and it still is in some, is Latinx or Latinx. Why? Because the Spanish language, as with many other languages, they have feminine and masculine endings. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. But if you're a male, you're a Latino. If you're a female, you're a Latina. Does that make sense? So, we can't call the Latinas Latinos, so we're going to do Latinx. Now, I don't know of... Thank you. Yes, that's the appropriate response. And this, it's asinine. It's the dumbest thing ever, yet the smartest and most elite in our country. And see, I'm glad this is the reaction. You need to be laughed, but we've laughed this off for 25 years, and now we're voting in Muslim Marxists. Right? Because we didn't recognize this is serious stuff. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. It goes against all rational thought. And most people, by the way, I have never found, and we have a few of Latinx people here. If you are offended by being called Hispanic or Latino, please let me know, and please let me know why. Right? Maybe we should just call people Americans or by their name, or rather than lumping them all into a group. We could do that, but no, we don't want to do that. Right? Because then how can we tell who to hate? Right? We've got to know. We've got to know who to hate. Right? And that is the purpose of all of this, by the way. It is the insidious, it is deception, and it is destruction. And so this stupid example of Latinx, which didn't fully catch on because it is so stupid, is still talked about in college courses today. Right? So understand it's real. Then I started seeing that we had a president who was going after ISIS and going after some things like that, but he would never actually use the term Islam. He would always say extremist. We're going against religious extremists, where they're extreme terrorists. And you can look at all the articles about this, that Barack Obama would never use the term radical Islam or extreme Islam, because why? We don't want to offend those Muslims that do not fit that category exactly. I agree with that. We need to be smart enough to know the difference. But the people who are blowing people up are doing it in the name of a religion called Islam. And they are radical, and they are serious about it. And if we don't recognize it, you're going to elect one of them to be the mayor of the largest city in the United States. Because we're so afraid of offending. We don't want to offend anyone. Right? Do you see the insidious nature of this? And what that does is as Christians, we do just like my professor was doing. Wait, you know what? We can find common ground. But what you're doing is you're walking outside the wall of your city. You're leaving your foundational principles so that you can meet halfway with an ideology that wants to destroy you. Don't do that. That's dumb. That's stupid. But that is what we have been doing for a long time, because we haven't recognized this is a spiritual battle, has always been a spiritual battle, and it's two ideologies enter and only one leaves. Right? And it is serious. And so then we move from that being politically correct, right, to when people started pushing back against that. And like, hey, this kind of sounds really stupid to me. Then the accusations start coming. What? You're not going to use that language? Is it because you're racist? Are you bigoted? What? You're against same-sex marriages? Are you homophobic? Right? What? You think that there's differences between male and female? Are you a misogynist and sexist? Now, try to prove to me that this is not happening. I would love to be wrong on all of this. But this is what is happening. Right? So now there's no basis. There's very little way that you can defend yourself. Just like Nehemiah. They start throwing out all these allegations of what he's trying to do. He's not doing them. How do you defend yourself against something you're not doing? And what we have done as the church, and what many well-meaning people have done, is no one wants to be called racist. No one wants to be called homophobic. No one wants to be called bigoted. And so it's like, well, if by standing up and kind of trying to say, hey, let's step back on the Latinx thing makes me a freaking bigot, maybe I'm just not going to say anything. Right? Because this is ridiculous. And it's so stupid, it will just blow over. No. It will not blow over. Because it's rooted in an ideology that is evil and wants to deceive and destroy. That is its goal. And so now we're caught in this place where it's really tough, and you're racist and you're bigoted and you're trying to figure out, how do I navigate these waters, because we don't want to do that, and we still want to be kind to people who are deceived by this ideology. And it's this mess of a place. And so now we have people that are trying to start standing up a little bit. But I'm not going to say it's too late, but this is pervasive in all of our institutions now. So now our institutions that were created to push back against this ideology have now been infiltrated by the ideology. And so now you're relying on those institutions to hopefully step up and push back against an ideology that they are completely infiltrated by. Right? It's important for us to understand with July 4th is coming up. Right? Our country was founded to push back against these ideologies. It truly was. We were by no means perfect, but we were a country that was recognized that there's good and there's evil, and that humans have the capacity for both, and that you need to create a system that does not give people ridiculous power because they will wield it over you. There needs to be checks and there needs to be balances, and we created this democratic republic. By the way, we are not a full democracy. I know people will, I know, but that's very true. If you're a full democracy, you're under just as much authoritarian as if you're under a king. Right? We're a democratic republic. It's a brilliant way to set up a government. There's one thing that we many times forget. I'll get the quote exactly. John Adams. He says this, he says, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. He wasn't talking about Islam, folks. I don't care what the ivory tower morons say. He was talking about Christianity. That is what, now did they have some differing views on Christianity? Sure. But they were rooted in biblical, foundational principles. He said it is made only for moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. So our institutions have now been captured by these ideologies. We are no longer a moral or religious people. Therefore, you have conversations when people say, man, it feels like everything's just crazy out here. Yeah, because we're no longer moral and religious, and we're under a government that requires that. So we're in a tough spot, and I want to use an example. This was actually a positive court case that was ruling. There are positive things that happen, and we need to realize that. There's pushback against this. There was a Supreme Court case against Texas because Texas passed a law. I mean, it's the most unreasonable law you could ever imagine, that you had to prove that you were 18 years old before you got on a porno site. So you go online on the web, and you go to Pornhub. That's the largest traffic site, by the way, in the world. You go on that site, and Texas made a law before you could see anything that you had to prove that you were at least 18 years old. Now, the thing that scares the absolute hell out of me is the internet has been around a while. There weren't freaking laws about this beforehand? No, there weren't. So there's been some states that have done that. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Free Speech Coalition was fighting against this law. You see what happens? Just as Nehemiah, they were going to try to use the rules of the temple to cause deception and destruction. Our Constitution, our good values, foundational values, are being used against us to cause destruction now. And so you did have the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision. So that means 2 people upheld that this law could happen. In a country of 340 million people, it came down to 2 people that said, yes, you can keep this law. Here's a summary of the dissent. And by the way, half of our country agrees with this dissent. Sadly, one political party completely, and then many in the other political party don't recognize what's going on here. And I would have considered myself in that place because I would have wrestled. No, free speech is very important. It's the height of what we can do. Yet Yeah, but whenever the spiritual battle gets a hold of it, it's going to make you be able to say things that come from the pit of hell. And it will destroy your society. Do you think that's what our Constitution was set up to allow to happen? No, it was not. But listen, here's a summary of the dissent. It says the dissent in Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton, particularly from Justice Kagan, argued that the law's requirement for online age verification imposes significant burdens on adult access to lawful speech. It emphasized that the online ID checks are more intrusive and risky than in-person checks, potentially leading to privacy violations and discouraging adults from accessing content that is legal for them. Well, God forbid a freaking pervert has to go through a few more hoops to verify that he can look at that stuff so that we can protect our children under the age of 18. This kind of stuff is from the pit of hell. And I hate this. I hate doing this. But there are more Republicans and more conservatives and more people in our churches today that would agree with that and say, you know what? That's right. You know, we do have free speech. We have to stand up for free speech and blah, 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 blah. No. That is not what this is about. They are using the institutions of things that are good and true and beautiful. Free speech is good and true and beautiful, and we should stand up for that. We don't do that at the expense of destroying the souls of our children. Wake up, right? And I know I'm preaching to the choir for the most part in here, right? But this is dangerous. We are in a serious battle. And I want to talk about this stuff in here so that hopefully you can talk to people who are deceived by this out there. Right? And that we recognize what evil truly is. And I wrestle making this statement. But now that I've said that, I guess I have to. Because I'm terrified of being a false teacher. It terrifies me to get up here and say things because I do not want to deceive. And that is not my intention. However, I know that I am human just like anyone else. And maybe there are other pastors that God audibly talks to them every Saturday night to prepare them to preach. He doesn't do that with me, which I think is the norm. But I am seeking His will. I am desiring to teach what is good, true, and beautiful. But man, it's scary. Right? I truly believe we basically have two alternatives that we're headed towards. One is and by the way, God triumphs in either one. Okay? But there's really only, I think we're at a point where we have two options. One, we are already on that path that the Lord is going to say, it's time to come back. I've always been real careful talking about stuff like that. And I'm still not talking about a timeline. But I think within my lifetime, we are going to see if that's the direction or not. If it's not the direction, the other one is that we're going to keep going down until we see the most amazing spiritual revival that we have ever seen before. Because that is the only chance for us. It's the only chance for our society is to see major spiritual revival. And in my humanness, I can't really see that. Right? But I know that God can do it. So I am functioning, moving forward, saying we're either getting close to the end times, which means we better start sharing the message of who Christ is to save people, because the time is getting near. If we're not there, fine. We are working for spiritual revival. And if we don't see that within the next few years, We may be headed the other direction. I don't know which. And if 20 years from now, everything is just hunky-dory and fine, and we really haven't seen a spiritual revival, but everybody's great and everybody's happy, well, then I guess I've been wrong this whole time. But that's where I believe we are. And we need to start making sure we understand how the enemy works so that we can help bring people out of their deception and into the life-saving power of Jesus Christ. Amen. We need to pray as Nehemiah prays. Keep my hands strong. Right? We need to keep moving forward, building the wall, building your spiritual foundation. When you have opportunities to talk to people that are confused, say, hey, I know you are. So am I. It's fearful. There's a lot of fear going on. But you know what? We've seen how the enemy has worked in the past, and God has overcome. Right? And God's going to overcome one way or the other. And we're going to be right along with him no matter which way it is. But we need to make that decision, that yes, I will decision right now. Because Satan is at work. These ideologies are dangerous. And if we don't recognize them in the church and share those with those that we love and those that we care about, we're not holding up our end of the deal. We are not building the wall that Christ has called us to build. So as we leave this place today, and especially as we go into July 4th, this country is worth fighting for. It is worth standing up for. Right? And God's not finished yet. That's right. And until he is, we are called to remain strong, to remain vigilant, to push back against the evil ideologies of this world and fill them with an ideology that points people to Christ and gives them hope, gives them joy, that gives them redemption. That is what God has called us to do. So let's make that decision now as we go into a very uncertain future, but one that we know that God ultimately wins and he overcomes. And people will eventually look back, just as they said when that wall was finished. Wow, there's no way that humans could have done this. I want them to look back at this point in history whenever they say, wow, how did that society survive 2025? They said, well, I don't know. It must have been God, because he's the only one that can do it. But he's calling us to get into the game, to get into the fight, and to stand up for what is good, true, and beautiful.